Hello, my name is Ade and welcome to a tutorial on RPG All-in-One. So this video will be covering how to make status effects. So status effects are pretty much self-explanatory. It's an effect that's applied to the player or to an enemy that does some kind of, that changes its status essentially, has some kind of effect. So if we go to our combat status effects and add a new one, we can give it a name. So let's call this one, for example, oncoming storm, and this effect can be applied to nearby allies within a certain radius. So any enemies within 5 of Unity 3D's units will be affected by the status effect too, if you would tick that. We can assign a skill method to it. So let's say this one is status impairment. So if you remove the status impairment effects, such as you might want to apply to a boss, then obviously this boss couldn't be affected by the oncoming storm. And then we can call stun. So stun is when the character can no longer move. We can also freeze the animation. It can also cause them to retreat or fare, so run away in the opposite direction of the player. It can cause a silence, so prevent them from using any abilities or skills. It can also cause a damage over time. So here we need to specify damage over time name, because if we have the same damage over time stacking, then that's not necessarily good. So we can give it a name, so for example poison, and every 1 second it will do some damage, and we'll say every second it will do 100 to 150 damage. Or for example we could have 0.1 seconds between every tick, and that would just mean you lose damage at a rapid rate. So status effects can have a duration, or they can last permanently. In most cases you want a duration, so this one lasts for 10 seconds, and it can have an active prefab, an on-activate prefab, and an unexpired prefab. And it can also be cancelable by another status effect. So for example, we have a burning status effect over here, but if you're then afflicted by the frozen status effect, you would want the frozen status effect to cancel out the burning, because obviously ice could stop you from burning, so that's how you can use that. And perhaps if you're under the effect of the oncoming storm, but you become enlightened, then the oncoming storm effect is removed. You then have a bunch of different attributes that you can buff: vitals, statistics. You can increase your vital regen or decrease it. So for example, we can have minus 50 strength here, or we could have plus 500. It's up to you. Same as with the regen bonuses, we can do a minus 0.2. That'll probably kill the player within a couple seconds, so maybe something like 0.02 would be better. And we can set and unset custom variables, and we can also reduce status effects. So for example, if you're affected by the oncoming storm and maybe enlightened doesn't cancel this, then perhaps anytime you become enlightened while under the effects of the oncoming storm, we reduce the duration of that by 20%. So a 10-second enlightened buff while you have the oncoming storm status effect active would only last for 8 seconds rather than 10. You can also remove an effect anytime this is active, so if you ever get afflicted by a burning while oncoming storm is active, it will be removed. It might also add an immunity to you. It might also make you more susceptible to a certain amount of damage, so maybe take 50% more damage from status impairments while this is active. You can also run an event, and you can also have a proc. So what a proc is a procedural event. So anytime you hit something while this effect is active, it will knock them back a distance of 1, or perhaps you have a 50% chance of knocking them back a distance of 1, or maybe anytime you get a critical hit, then you'll knock them back, or maybe every 3 hits while this effect is active, you'll knock them back, or apply a status effect on them or yourself, perhaps knock them up, perhaps every time you hit them, you'll cast a skill on them, or a skill on yourself, for example like a heal, or you can have it pull them towards you all the way or a certain distance. So obviously you can see just from this proc effect you can have many different behaviors from one status effect. So let's go and cover the prefabs. So let's take this off 2D. So we have the active prefab. So the active prefab is a prefab that is linked to the target of the status effect as long as the effect is active. So for example, a berserker effect might have a couple of spinning axes circling the player. Maybe a healing effect would have like a green aura, and maybe additional damage effect would have crossed swords above the player's head as long as the effect is active. On activate simply is just a short-lived prefab that will play when you activate the effect, and on expired again is just a short-lived prefab that will show up when the effect runs out. So you can go ahead and create these prefabs simply by clicking generate prefab and then add in perhaps a particle effect. So maybe you want a cyclone. So while this effect is active on the player, it will be showing this cyclone around them. And you do want to make sure you have the effect, if it's a particle effect, to be looping. So you have this continuous cyclone looping around them. That would be quite cool. And again, your on activate prefab would be something quite short-lived. So maybe like a small explosion or something like this. Just a very short-lived prefab. So there we go. You see that plays once and it's done. So that's something that you don't want to loop, because this will have a destroy helper, which will be destroyed after a certain amount of time. And that's essentially how status effects work. So you can apply status effects on skills. So for example, a fireball can apply a status effect on hit. For example, the oncoming storm, and you can customize the duration and the chance for it to apply. And that's essentially how status effects work. So you can have ones which stun, which silence, and however you want them to work, basically. So if you'd like more information on RPG All-in-One, check out the tutorials and other links in the description, and have a wonderful day.